I'm absolutely thrilled to take part in iPRES 2021 with this work on executable archives, as this is an important project within Intag Digital. My background is in computer science and mathematics, and Dr. Maria Čubrić, she is also an expert in computer science and business aspects of software engineering. So what you will hear today is really the consideration of the digital preservation, both from the traditional preservation aspects and also from computer science aspects, where we try to bring together these important areas to work on digital preservation. We have selected an important problem, which is a challenging problem facing a long-term preservation of research data, and that has become increasingly important. Researchers in chemical engineering, bioanalysis, pharma, life sciences, they conduct experiments in laboratories with very complex instruments. The data comes from sensors and is transferred into specialist software. And the importance of this software cannot be overemphasized, because the software itself is the only means for researchers to interpret what is coming out. And thinking about the knowledge generation, knowledge transfer, knowledge that is created at this point in research is absolutely critical, because it gets then transferred into other stages, for example, in drug discovery. And we know very well now how important that is. The data needs to be then preserved for a very long time, and in not just derivative data, the results from the software processing, but also the raw data. And in sectors like pharma and bioanalysis, there are regulations that very clearly spell out the requirements for data integrity. And it means data has to satisfy some criteria to be called as integral and trustful. We already know that in the broader community, when we try to share data, the FAIR principles are adopted just to declare that the collection of data is fair and therefore should be used by other researchers. Similarly here, we have ALCOA principles that they all address the aspects that we expect, the attributable, legible, original, accurate. But I would like to focus attention on these four other aspects in red, because they really emphasize the importance of these aspects for digital, and that is exactly what the challenges are. When you create a study, and you may have to ensure that all the experiments that you've got stay complete, they're consistent, they're enduring, they're available for decades probably, because the regulators require the data has to be available. And most importantly, data has to stay dynamic. You can't just print it. Data has to be dynamic so they can be processed with the software to reproduce the results. As we all know, as soon as there is a software in place, then we have a problem of a rapid obsolescence and ensuring that we can provide the functionality that's really required for reproduction of studies. Because of the strict regulations, of course, there are then many organizations that help practitioners meet the regulatory requirements. One such organization is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and they're advising now. Recently, they released latest guidance. It was in fact on the 20th of September this year, that if you're using computerized system and your computer system has features that are absolutely critical for readability and reproducibility, then you must continue to maintain the software. And they're suggesting that the software should be maintained in virtual environments. Of course, virtual environments are now becoming readily available. So therefore, we have no excuse. We have to really think about effective ways of leveraging the advances in computer science to help us then with the long-term data preservation and the study reproducibility. And so here I would like to just put it in the perspective of a kind of preservation language. I have been involved in a number of projects, the Planets and SCAPE European projects with libraries and archives, and I'm acutely aware of the challenges that the community is facing when it comes to long-term maintenance of active dynamic objects and preserving the significant property of these. So just to frame it, you can imagine that a research study that may have thousands of files and data, millions of data points now is stored in some kind of content management system. The data, the files have been transferred into a an archive, and that becomes a complex digital object that needs to be preserved. Now, when we are characterizing the digital object, we often look at the persisted files and try to figure out from the file format what should be then the instantiation of that file format. We also look at the context and software. So we just want to here emphasize that the requirements coming from research really put lots of emphasis on these significant properties that come from the interaction between the stored data and the software itself. And sometimes it's really hard to even spell out what these properties are because they are so intrinsically related to the software. So for the purpose of this initiative, preservation of research data and research studies, we then try to find what would be the sufficient conditions under which we can claim that our chances to preserve these significant properties are high. Therefore, we look at the data integrity that traditionally is done very well with the storage and preventing bit rotting and so on. And then software integrity, which means making sure that the software itself can be guaranteed to stay immutable and usable over time. So with this in mind, we kind of scoped the technical aspects, but then we also looked at the use scenarios and the complexity in a reproduction of a research study. So we would like to emphasize here that it's really hard to find one single person who can cover it all. So first, the archive is the person who will work with the researchers to package the research data in order to be preserved and in the archive and accessible in the future. Archive is the one who can advise on the best practice there. Now, researchers are the only ones who can reproduce the studies because the archivists cannot possibly be trained in every possible research protocol. And then we have IT specialists who may not know the software, how it's used, but IT specialists knows how to install the software and how to defend the software from cyber attacks and other issues. So now we have three specialists. All these three specialists are absolutely critical for the reproduction of the study. So now our then problem is creating an environment in which this can all happen will dependence on obsolete software and the separation of concerns among these three individuals. So as a research question for us was, what can we do to extend the archiving practice now with capability to enable reproduction of research studies? So create an executable archive with the dependence on electronic data and a long-term software support. So in order to kind of attack this research problem, we said, okay, let's first create a framework, executable archive framework, that will spell out all of the requirements coming from IT practices and scientific practices, and then how to explore that so that we can create a technical framework that can work. So once we have I will first explain what the framework is and then show you a particular instance that we created based on that framework. So on the right-hand side, you can see that there's a big red box. That is a newer part that complements the electronic data archive. So the electronic data archive is already a very complex environment with electronic records, metadata, preserved digital objects, and then in our case, in case of research, our raw data is also sitting there. And what is now enabled is active use through software. So for that part, within the framework, we separated technical components from the processes and procedures. Among technical components, as you can anticipate, we have to worry about software file storage, software metadata, software hosting, which is live virtual machines, and then very importantly, the connection between the archive and the environment where software is running. And on purpose, we didn't put software archive subsumed within the software hosting because of many security issues. Therefore, for now, we are representing them next to each other. I should also mention that it's very quick to kind of go and dive into technical parts, but creating a virtual machine with software really is only 20% of the work. Creating all the support for all other management aspects, installation management, user management, and because the platform is contemporary, so the platform is sitting on the latest, greatest infrastructure, that infrastructure needs to maintain. So that's why I'm basically, even though this is kind of 50-50, we should keep in mind that, in fact, the system is very, very complex because of the processes. So now about the case study we have created based on the Executable Archive Framework, an instance of the implementation, which is called software library. So the software library is part where we host the software, provide connection to software and data, and enable reusability of software for study reconstruction. From the processes perspective, probably interesting part might be the transition of software from the operational use to this archive reading use, if you wish. So software is now in the kind of capacity of a reading facility rather than operational. So I would now just explain what normally is done. If you didn't have software library, the archivist would take the raw data out of the archive and give it to researcher. Researcher would walk to a PC with the software, and then that would be an area, environment where the reproduction would be done. The data will be imported, software will be used and compared with the report. The report also comes from the archive. However, over time, this software, the PC becomes old. The PC is now obsolete from all practical purposes because the hardware is at risk and the operating system is at risk because operating system is not supported. Therefore, this must be isolated. You can't put this machine anymore on the network. And so raw data must be physically transferred anywhere you can on USB stick or some other means that you can get it into a PC in order to reproduce the study. So this presents the risks of course, the hardware failure and security risks, plus the productivity sinks because of this manual process that's going on. So the software library is then created, so the virtualization of software is done so that virtual machines contain the validated software. And then there is a way to transfer data into the software library, just the data that needs to be used for reproduction of study. So it's really a minimum exposure of the archive for the period of time that needs to be done. So the reconstruction of study then involves any modern PC, so any modern PC that a researcher would have with access to the archive on the left side and the software library. The data is brought in a safe way using a special data transfer desktop. That data then becomes available to a virtualized software, and the study can be reproduced then. And so I'm just going to quickly show you how that works in practice. And here is a browser, and in this browser I just entered my username. That will then take me, when I log in, takes me into a hosting platform. So this is now an area where I have all my software that I need for reproduction of studies. As I said, the transfer is very important, so I'm going to first activate a transfer desktop. This is where I can bring the data in from an archive. And just to show you, say, I'm going to pretend my archive is, say, OneDrive. So I go to my, say, OneDrive where I have stored some project data. And this data now I can transfer into this environment. So if I click here, say I can pick a couple of folders and I say download this. This is now the data is being downloaded into the software library environment. It's right here, you can see it. But more importantly, it is put in my research area. So OneDrive download is right here, and I'm going to extract the files. So you can see now this is the two folders that I basically downloaded into my area are now available to me. To do this study reconstruction, I just go now to an area where I have my research desktops, and from there I can activate a new desktop that appears in a new tab. So here is the environment where I'm running Windows XP. It is very old operating system, now 20 years old. And now I can see the data. See, the data is in the same area. I can now easily access any of this. So let me just say click on one of these. I should emphasize all of these data formats are the same. If you look at the extension, it says WIFF. And so I'm going to click on one of these to activate the software. And this is now part of my study reconstruction. I want to verify that the results are the same as what I reported, say, back then. And so the data must be rendered exactly the same way, because as you could see, while the data here is shown in tabular form, the researchers are relying upon this. This is what they see, this is how they make decisions. Now, I said they also have to have a very extensive kind of audit functionality. So here I can also look at how old the file is that was here reproduced. And if you just browse here a little bit, I think this file is quite old. It is from 2002. So it's 19 years old file. Final point, just want to make, I said there are different types of files. If I now open this file, I'm just going to drag it here and open it. It is the same extension file as I mentioned, but if you just look at now this one, this is a very complicated visualization where a researcher can now browse through all these experiments and observe them. Imagine this having to be printed. So it absolutely is not a way to preserve in any other way, but create an environment. So I just wanted to show you, this is an instance of a software library that was created based on these requirements, and I show how they map onto it. The software library includes the digital vault where the software is stored, the hosting portal that I just showed you, and there is also metadata portal. But most important are these virtual desktop that I just showed you. They appear in the tabs, yet they're easy to use. However, setting them up so that you can have secure access to non-secure virtual machine is a puzzle that we had to solve. Here, I'm just going to quickly mention a couple of things about the processes and procedures. As I said, the installation of software itself is very important, and we had to think very carefully who does what. So the IT professional first does the installation of the software and then hand it over to a researcher who has to do the operational testing, because the researcher is the only one who knows how that is done. And all of that is very, very carefully documented. And we also ask researchers to do one more thing. They have to qualify, give us the set of instructions that would be a validation of the software. So if they just open the virtual machine or just open the desktop and want to make sure that the software didn't change, then we would perform these qualification steps. It's a mini test with the same data. It has to produce the same thing. And the reason why we are doing this is because even though the environment that we are constantly monitoring and making stable, the software itself may have a behavior that change if you use it over time. Therefore, if we find that there is any change in the results at that PQ level, the qualification level, we would then do a reinstallation or reinstantiate a new virtual machine instance. And as I showed you in the study reconstruction, we have archivists involved, we have a researcher involved. It is impossible really to do this with one person doing all of these aspects. So finally, on the human factor management, because of this complexity of multiple experts, really it is all about ongoing training and transferring knowledge constantly. So the researcher needs to transfer the knowledge of how to use the software. And there is a detailed documentation of all the steps, the installation steps, the validation steps, all of that has to be put in the archive as part of the executable archive documentation. So in short, I know it was very quick and packed, but I just kind of summarize. We want to emphasize that data integrity and software integrity together need to be considered if we really want to preserve significant properties of very complex digital objects like research archives. And there is hope, basically saying we don't have to change too much. There is electronic data archiving that is already very well done. The question then is, how do you bring the software in and integrate it? And so we have offered this Executable Archive Framework as a way to think about it, and we showed one instance of it. The only thing I would say, holistically looking this from the archiving point of view, if there's something to be optimized, it is really about timing. When do you put the software into a library? When do you decide that it's needed? And the best is to do that early. When you archive the data, do it at the same time, because while there's operational software, it's easy to validate it. and make sure that there are no any side effects that are not anticipated. So I will conclude with this, and I just want to thank you. And in the spirit of the Beijing hosting, I just want to put one idea forward. I claim the software is the yang of digital. The software is the one that gives life to yin, the stored content files. It brings to life what we need to see and basically bring to existence our digital creations. Yeah.